The night was quiet in a way that felt too heavy. The small human settlement rested at the edge of a dusty valley, far from the crowded cities of Earth. Most people who lived here liked the silence. It made them feel safe. It made them feel forgotten by the wider galaxy. Jonah Hale did not feel safe. He stood near the window of his small house, holding a cup of cooling tea, watching the stars. Ever since humanity joined the galactic community, the sky no longer felt empty. Ships passed by sometimes, distant lights moving between stars. Jonah usually found it comforting. Tonight the stars felt like eyes. Jonah was not a soldier, he was not important. He worked as a maintenance technician, fixing water filters and solar panels. He chose this place because nothing ever happened here. That was the point. Then the ground trembled. It was soft at first, like distant thunder. Jonah frowned and set the cup down. The tremble came again, stronger this time, followed by a low sound that vibrated through the air. Not an explosion, not a storm, something controlled. A ship. Jonah's heart began to beat faster. No ships landed here. Ever. He stepped outside. The night air was cold and dry. A large shape descended beyond the edge of the settlement, blocking part of the sky. It was dark, smooth, and wrong in a way that made his stomach tighten. Blue lights pulsed along its surface like slow breaths. People began to step out of their homes. No one spoke. Everyone knew what kind of ship that was. Carvex. Stories about the Carvex were known across human space. They were not monsters in the simple sense. They were worse. They were warriors with a strict code, a species that believed strength and honor were the only truths worth respecting. They did not raid or loot. They conquered, cleanly, efficiently. Entire worlds surrendered at the sight of their fleets. The Carvex did not come quietly. Except now, the ship landed without fire or force. No weapons were fired, no warning sirens sounded. The ramp lowered with a smooth hiss. One figure emerged. He was tall, far taller than any human. His armor was dark and layered, shaped to his body like a second skin. Symbols were carved into the metal, old and sharp. His face was visible. Gray skin stretched over hard features. His eyes glowed faintly, not with anger, but with focus. A Carvex warlord. Jonah had seen images before. He had never expected to see one standing in the dirt road near his house. People began to back away. Some ran, some froze, no one screamed. Fear pressed down like a weight. The Carvex warrior did not advance, he stood still. Slowly, with careful movement, he reached to his side and removed a long object. Jonah's breath caught, but the warrior did not raise it. He placed it on the ground, a weapon left behind, then another, and another. Piece by piece, the warrior disarmed himself. When he finished, he stepped back and spread his hands to show they were empty. A murmur moved through the crowd, confusion mixed with fear. The warrior lowered his head slightly. It was not a bow, but it was close. "I come alone," he said. His voice was deep but clear. The translator embedded in the air carried his words into simple human language. "I come unarmed. I come under binding oath." No one answered. The warrior lifted his head. His glowing eyes scanned the faces around him, then settled on Jonah. Jonah felt the look like a physical touch. "You," the warrior said. Jonah's mouth went dry. He looked behind him, hoping the warrior meant someone else. No one stood there. "I require you," the warrior continued. Jonah took a slow step back. You have the wrong person," he said. His voice shook. "I'm nobody." The warrior studied him for a long moment, then he nodded once. "That is why you are correct." The words made no sense. Jonah felt hands grip his arms as people pulled him backward. Someone whispered that he should run. Someone else whispered that he was already dead. The warrior raised one hand again, palm open. "I will not harm," he said. "Not now, not here." Fear did not leave, but it shifted. It turned into something sharper, uncertainty. "I have crossed stars," the warrior said. "I have broken fleets, I have ended wars, and I stand before your door to ask." Jonah stared at him. "Ask what?" The warrior took one heavy step forward. People flinched, but he stopped well short of Jonah. The ground did not shake this time. "I ask for aid," the warrior said. Silence fell like a held breath. Jonah laughed once, short and sharp, before he could stop himself. "You're joking." The warrior did not react. "My people fear nothing," the warrior continued. "Yet we face an end we cannot strike." Jonah shook his head. "This is some kind of trick." "If it were," the warrior said, "you would already be ash." That much was likely true. The warrior looked down just slightly. "My name is Threx of the Seventh Blade. I am sworn to conquest, I am sworn to victory, and tonight I am sworn to humility." The word felt strange coming from such a being. Jonah swallowed. Why me? Threx's eyes dimmed just a fraction. Because you are not a leader, you are not a soldier. You are not bound by command. That makes this worse, Jonah said. I can't help you. You already can, Threx replied. Lights appeared in the distance as security forces finally arrived. They stopped far away, weapons ready but unsure. No one wanted to be the one who started something. Threx did not look at them. I studied your species, Threx said. I studied your wars, your failures, your collapses. Jonah stiffened. That doesn't make me special. No, Threx agreed. It makes you human. Jonah felt anger rise through the fear. If you've studied us, then you know we don't like being threatened. Threx nodded. I do not threaten, I request. He lowered himself. The movement was slow, deliberate, a massive warrior kneeling in the dirt. Gasps spread through the settlement. Jonah stared, unable to move. I kneel, Threx said, because standing has failed my kind. Jonah's thoughts raced. This was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. Get up, Jonah said quietly. I cannot, Threx replied. Not until you hear me. Jonah closed his eyes for a moment. He could feel the eyes of everyone around him. He could feel the weight of history pressing down. Fine, he said. Talk. Threx spoke of a civilization that had mastered war but forgotten change. A people who punished weakness so harshly that no one dared admit it. A society where every mistake was erased instead of learned from. We win, Threx said. Always, until the battlefield changed. He described enemies that did not fight head-on. Problems that could not be crushed, systems that failed slowly, quietly. We do not know how to bend, Threx said, only how to break. Jonah listened, arms crossed, heart still racing. You want advice, Jonah said. That's it. I want understanding, Threx replied. From those who survive loss. Jonah thought of human history, of wars, plagues, mistakes, of how humans argued, adapted, tried again. You came to the wrong place, Jonah said. I'm not a teacher. Threx finally looked up fully. That is why you are the right one. The air felt tight. The galaxy felt smaller. Jonah realized something then. This warrior was afraid, not of death, of failure. And that frightened Jonah more than any threat. The night remained quiet. But nothing would ever be simple again. Morning came slowly, like the world itself was unsure whether it wanted to continue after the night before. Jonah barely slept. When he did, his dreams were full of glowing eyes and kneeling giants. When sunlight finally touched the window, he sat up, heart already heavy. For a moment he hoped everything had been a stressed dream brought on by too much news and too little rest. Then he heard the sound outside. Heavy footsteps, careful ones. Jonah stood and looked through the window. Threx was still there. The Carvex warrior sat on the ground near Jonah's house, armor dark against the pale dust. He had not moved all night. His weapons still lay where he had placed them, untouched. Security forces remained at a distance, tense but inactive. No one knew what to do with a threat that refused to act like one. Jonah rubbed his face and sighed. This is really happening, he muttered. He dressed slowly and stepped outside. The air was cold, carrying the smell of metal and dry earth. When Threx noticed him, the warrior rose smoothly to his feet but did not step closer. You live, Threx said. Jonah stared at him. Was that ever in doubt? For my kind, Threx replied, nights like this usually end differently. Jonah did not ask how. He did not want to know. You said you wanted help, Jonah said. You don't get to just sit on my lawn and scare everyone. Threx inclined his head. Then guide me. Jonah looked around. People were watching from behind doors and windows. Fear still lived in their eyes, but now curiosity had joined it. Fine, Jonah said, but you don't talk to me like I'm some chosen hero. Threx paused. I do not know how else to speak. You'll learn, Jonah said, if that's really what you want. They walked. Jonah led Threx away from the settlement toward a low ridge where the land opened wide. The security forces followed at a distance, quiet and alert. Threx did not seem to notice them. Start talking, Jonah said, and this time explain why your people can't fix their own problems. Threx looked ahead, not at Jonah. Because we do not believe problems should exist, Jonah frowned. That makes no sense. To us it does, Threx said. A flaw is a failure. A failure is weakness. Weakness is removed. Removed how? Jonah asked. Threx was silent for a moment. From record, from memory, from society. Jonah stopped walking. You erase people. We correct them, Threx said evenly. Jonah felt cold. That's not correction. That's fear, Threx turned to him. Fear enforces order. Fear kills growth, Jonah replied. Threx studied him closely. That belief is why we are here. They reached the ridge. Below them, the land stretched empty and quiet. Jonah sat on a rock and gestured for Threx to do the same. After a pause, the warrior lowered himself, careful not to damage the stone. You said your civilization is failing, Jonah said. What does that actually mean? Threx's voice lowered. Our systems are perfect. That is the problem. Jonah raised an eyebrow. We built everything to endure only one correct outcome, Threx continued. When conditions changed, systems failed instead of adapting. Like what? Jonah asked. Our cities rely on exact patterns, Threx said. Energy flow. Population roles, decision paths. When something unexpected happens, nothing knows how to respond. Jonah leaned back. Humans plan for things to go wrong. That is chaos, Threx said. That's reality, Jonah replied. Threx was quiet again. His hands curled slowly, then relaxed. We tried to correct the failures, Threx said. We punished deviation harder. We enforced tradition more strictly. The problems worsened. Jonah nodded. He had seen that before in companies, in governments, in people. You doubled down, Jonah said. Yes, Threx agreed. And we are losing, Jonah exhaled. So you came here to me, why not diplomats, scientists? They would speak as leaders, Threx said. Leaders defend systems. I need someone who lives inside failure. Jonah laughed softly. You picked the right species, wrong person. Threx looked at him. You repair broken machines. So, Jonah said, you do not discard them, Threx replied. You learn why they broke. Jonah fell silent. That hit closer than he liked. What do you expect from me? Jonah asked finally. Teach me, Threx said. Teach me how your kind survives imperfection. Jonah shook his head. I don't have lessons, we just try things. Threx's eyes brightened slightly. That is what we cannot do. Jonah stood. Come with me. They returned to the settlement, this time with less fear in the air. People still watched, but whispers replaced panic. Threx walked slower, clearly trying not to frighten anyone. Jonah led him into his small home. It was cramped. Tools lay on tables. Old parts were stacked in corners. Nothing matched. Everything worked anyway. Threx looked around, confused. This place is inefficient. Jonah smiled faintly. It's lived in. Jonah pulled a broken water filter from under the sink and set it on the table. This stopped working last month. You replaced it? Threx asked. No, Jonah said. I fixed it. Twice. Why not discard it? Threx asked. Because I didn't know what caused the problem yet, Jonah replied. Threx leaned closer, studying the device. You allowed it to fail again. Jonah nodded. Failure teaches. Threx straightened slowly. For us, repeated failure ends a career. For us, Jonah said, it starts one. Threx said nothing, but something shifted in his posture, less rigid, less certain. Over the next hours, Jonah talked, not like a teacher, but like a human. He spoke of mistakes, of things that went wrong and led to better ideas, of how humans argued, disagreed, tried again. Threx listened without interruption. You tolerate weakness, Threx said. We tolerate being human, Jonah corrected. What if someone refuses to improve? Threx asked. Jonah shrugged. Then they deal with consequences, but we don't erase them for trying. Threx looked troubled. Our greatest fear is being remembered for failure. Jonah met his eyes. Our greatest fear is being remembered for nothing. The words hung between them. Hours passed. Security forces relaxed slightly. News spread. Off-world channels buzzed with disbelief. A Carvex warlord was sitting in a human home, listening. Finally, Threx stood. I must return, he said. My absence will be noticed. Jonah nodded. And? I will speak of this, Threx said. Of you, Jonah sighed. I didn't agree to anything big. You agreed to listen, Threx replied. That is already forbidden, Jonah frowned. Forbidden? Threx's voice grew quiet. Questioning our way is treason. Jonah's stomach tightened. Then you're in danger, Threx nodded. Yes. Then why do it? Jonah asked. Threx looked at the broken filter on the table. Because breaking again without learning would end us, he said. They walked outside together. Threx retrieved his weapons but did not wear them. Instead, he held them with care. I will return, Threx said. Jonah crossed his arms. You better, Threx paused. When I do, I may not be welcome among my own. Jonah looked at him. Welcome is overrated, Threx considered this. Then, for the first time, he made a sound that might have been a laugh. The ship lifted off quietly, leaving only dust and questions behind. Jonah stood alone under the sky, knowing one truth with absolute certainty. Humanity had just stepped into something far bigger than war. And it had done so without firing a single shot. The days after Threx left felt slower, like time itself was waiting. Jonah returned to his work, but nothing felt normal anymore. Fixing solar panels and water systems seemed small compared to what he had been part of. Every time he looked at the sky, he wondered if the Carvex warlord was still alive, or if his people had already punished him for daring to question their way. The settlement changed too. People talked more, not about fear but about meaning. About what it meant that the most feared warriors in the galaxy had come not with threats but with doubt. News spread fast across human space. Governments tried to control the story, but it slipped through anyway. Humans argued, as they always did. Some called Threx a liar. Some called him brave. Some warned that this was the start of something dangerous. Jonah ignored most of it. He focused on waiting. 3 weeks passed. Then the sky split with light. This time the ship was not alone. Multiple Carvex vessels appeared in orbit, dark shapes against the stars. Panic threatened to return, but something was different. They did not descend in formation. They did not broadcast demands. One ship detached and began its descent. Jonah felt his heart pound as the familiar blue lights touched the ground once more. The ramp lowered. Threx stepped out. He looked the same, yet not. His armor bore new markings, thin lines etched into the metal. His posture was still strong, but the rigid certainty was gone. He carried no weapons. Behind him came others. 3 more Carvex warriors emerged, each tall and imposing, yet visibly tense. Their eyes moved constantly, taking in the settlement, the humans watching from a distance. Security forces formed lines again, careful and silent. Jonah walked forward before anyone could stop him. "You came back," Jonah said. Threx inclined his head. "I said I would." Jonah studied the others. "Friends, observers," Threx replied, "and doubters." One of the other warriors spoke, his voice sharp. "You risk much by standing here." Threx did not turn. "So do you by questioning me." Jonah raised a hand. "Easy, no one's here to fight." The warrior looked at Jonah with clear confusion. "Then why are we here?" Threx answered. "To learn." The words sounded heavy in their language. They moved to the same ridge as before. This time Jonah did not sit alone. The Carvex followed, movements stiff but curious. "You told them everything?" Jonah asked quietly. "I told them what I could," Threx said. "Not all listened." One of the observers crossed his arms. "You claim weakness is strength," Jonah sighed. "No, I claim pretending you're perfect is what breaks you." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "Our perfection built an empire. And now it's cracking," Jonah replied calmly. Silence followed. Threx spoke again. "Since my return, I have been challenged, not with blades, but with words." Jonah blinked. "That's new, right?" "Yes," Threx said. "It was uncomfortable." Jonah smiled faintly. "Welcome to being human adjacent." Threx turned to the others. "I showed them your records, your history, your failures." One of the observers made a low sound. "You glorify disaster." "No," Jonah said. "We remember it." "Why?" the observer demanded. "So we don't repeat it," Jonah answered. "And when we do it differently." Another Carvex spoke, quieter. "Your people argue constantly." Jonah nodded. "Yeah, it's annoying." Threx added, "But their arguments change things." The observers exchanged looks. Threx continued. "Our councils do not argue, they confirm." "That's not discussion," Jonah said. "That's echo." The word echoed in the air. One of the observers stepped forward. "Your way invites instability," Jonah shrugged. "So does reality." They spent hours talking. No threats, no commands, just questions. The Carvex struggled with the idea that systems could be flexible, that roles could change, that admitting error did not mean erasing honor. "What happens when someone fails publicly?" one asked. Jonah thought. "Sometimes they're embarrassed, sometimes they're fired. Sometimes they're forgiven." "Forgiven?" the warrior repeated. "Yeah," Jonah said, "because punishment doesn't always fix things." Threx nodded slowly. "This concept angers many." "Growth usually does," Jonah said. As the sun dipped low, Threx shared something he had not before. "Our children are tested early," he said. "Those who fail are redirected." Jonah frowned. "Redirected how?" "Into silence," Threx replied. Jonah's jaw tightened. "That's cruel." "It is tradition," Threx said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jonah looked at the observers. "You're afraid of wasted potential." They hesitated. "You think failure wastes people," Jonah continued. "We think failure teaches people." One observer looked away. That night the Carvex stayed, not in the settlement but nearby. They did not sleep much. Instead, they watched humans live. Children played, adults argued. Someone fixed a broken rover with parts that did not belong together. One Carvex stared for a long time. "Why does that work?" he asked Jonah. Jonah laughed softly. "Because we tried." The next morning, Threx approached Jonah alone. "They will not accept this easily," Threx said. "Some already call for my removal." Jonah leaned against a railing. "Change scares people." "It terrifies my kind," Threx replied. Jonah looked up at him. "You don't have to carry this alone." Threx was silent. Then slowly he did something no Carvex had ever done before another species. He removed a marking from his armor. "This symbol means unbroken victory," Threx said. "I no longer deserve it." Jonah shook his head. "You deserve it more now." Threx met his eyes. "That belief will be challenged." "And you'll argue back," Jonah said. Threx considered. "I will try." A message arrived from orbit, a formal summons. Threx read it and closed his eyes. "They demand proof," he said. "Of what?" Jonah asked. "That adaptation works," Threx replied. Jonah frowned. "You want a demonstration?" "Yes," Threx said, "a shared one." Jonah thought of all the ways humans tested ideas, slowly, carefully, with room to fail. "We can do that," Jonah said, "but not your way." Threx nodded. "I know." The observers watched as Jonah began to plan something simple. Not a weapon, not a strategy, a system, a joint project. Human and Carvex minds together, it would not be perfect. That was the point. As the stars rose again, the galaxy shifted just a little. Not with force, but with the dangerous idea that even the strongest could change. The project began small, the way most human ideas did. Jonah insisted on it. No grand speeches, no symbols of power, no fleets or councils. Just a problem that already existed and could not be solved by strength alone. The settlement's water system was old. It worked, but barely. Filters failed often, pipes cracked in the heat and cold. Humans fixed it again and again, adjusting, improving, changing small things each time. It was messy, imperfect, and alive. The Carvex observers did not understand why Jonah chose this. "This is insignificant," one of them said, watching humans take apart a pump. Jonah wiped his hands on a cloth. "That's the point." Threx stood nearby, silent but attentive. Jonah explained it simply. "Your people build things to never fail. We build things knowing they will." "That is weakness," an observer said. "That is honesty," Jonah replied. They began working together. At first it was awkward. The Carvex wanted exact plans, final designs, clear authority. Humans argued, suggested changes, tried things that did not work and laughed about it. When a joint design failed on the first test, one of the Carvex stiffened, clearly expecting punishment. Jonah just shrugged. "Okay, that didn't work. Why?" The question hung in the air. No blame, no shame, just curiosity. Threx noticed the shift immediately. "This is the moment," he said quietly to the observers. "This is where we would erase the mistake." "And you woe?" one asked. "No," Threx said. "We will stay." They stayed. They adjusted the design, changed materials, tried again. It worked better, not perfect, but better. Data was sent to orbit. Then more data, raw, unpolished, full of notes about what went wrong. The response from the Carvex Council was not immediate. When it came, it was cold. They questioned Threx's authority. They questioned his sanity. They questioned why he allowed humans to fail openly instead of correcting them. Threx answered every message, not with defiance but with detail. "This system works because it can change," he wrote, "because failure is allowed to speak." Some listened, many did not. Pressure grew, not physical, cultural. Threx's markings were challenged. His past victories were questioned. His honor was weighed against tradition. Jonah watched it all from a distance, helpless in a way that felt new. "You don't have to do this," Jonah said one night as they sat under the stars. "You can leave, say it failed." Threx shook his head slowly. "If I retreat now, the lesson dies," Jonah sighed. "Humans lose fights all the time, we still learn." Threx looked at him. "My people do not know how to lose without disappearing." That was the real battle. The turning point came from an unexpected place. One of the observers, the quietest among them, asked Jonah a question. "What happens to your failures?" the observer asked. Jonah thought. "Some become stories, some become warnings, some become jokes, some become foundations." The observer processed this. "They remain." "Yes," Jonah said, "they stay with us." The observer returned to orbit with that idea, not as a report, as a question. Soon other Carvex began asking questions too. What if a failed general could teach? What if a broken system could be studied instead of erased? What if honor could survive imperfection? The council fractured, not into violence but into debate. Loud, uncomfortable debate. For the first time in Carvex history, confirmation was replaced with argument. It was messy, it was slow, it was terrifying to them, and it worked. A decision was made, not unanimous, but enough. The Carvex would not conquer humanity, they would acknowledge it publicly. The announcement echoed across the galaxy. The feared warriors of the stars named humanity not as rivals, not as subjects, but as teachers of adaptation. Other species were stunned. Some were afraid, because this was worse than a human military victory. Humans had changed the Carvex without firing a shot. Threx returned to the settlement one final time, not as a warlord, as a representative. He stood before Jonah, no armor markings of victory left. In their place were new symbols, still undefined. "My people will change," Threx said. "Slowly, painfully." Jonah nodded. "That's how it works." "They will never be like humans," Threx added. Jonah smiled. "Good, we already have enough of us." Threx made the sound again, that almost laugh. Across the stars, perceptions shifted. Humans were no longer seen as weak newcomers. They were seen as something far more dangerous, a species that could survive failure, a species that could teach even the strongest how to bend instead of break. And it all began with a knock on a quiet door, not to kill, but to ask.